you have a lot of people coming out of the woodwork to try to organize things and do things, and a lot of them, they mean well, they just don't know what they're doing particularly. It's good to have competent people, real go-getters, self-starters, people who understand business working on this, because we're going to need that when this bill passes. So I'm very glad that you're involved. I just want to give you a little update about the bill and talk about it very briefly. It was interesting. I first got involved in this issue because of I met some mom who had a boy with intractable epilepsy, Dravet syndrome, and that led me to meet veterans, that led me to meet cancer patients, that led me to meet people with horrible pain, and do the research and understand the importance of this to so many people's lives. So I introduced the bill, but the way the Pennsylvania legislature works is I'm a Democrat, a fairly liberal Democrat, and the Republicans control the legislature, and the legislature isn't really made up of individuals, it's made up of two teams, and there's a lot of suspicion across the aisle. So what I really needed was for it not to be my effort alone. I needed a bipartisan approach. I needed to find a Republican, preferably a really good, hardcore right-wing lunatic. Mike Fulmer came along, and let me just say, Mike, I love Mike like a brother. He is an amazing guy. If you don't know him, he's really wonderful, more enthusiastic about this issue than I am. But he's also a dream come true in terms of the politics of this, because Mike is the real deal in terms of being a conservative Republican. Obama was born in Kenya, the world's 6,000 years old, all that stuff. He's got all the credentials, okay? But on this issue, he's terrific. And the bipartisan approach led us to be able to people to actually listen to us. And we actually did something that never happens in Harrisburg. We changed people's minds. And where we started out with about 6 votes out of 50 in the Senate, when we took the final vote last session, it passed 43-7, which is an amazing bipartisan accomplishment. You can't name a bridge 43-7. Okay? And so that's how that. So, but we ran out of time in the House, so we have to go through it again. But that's probably just as well, because Governor Corbett, who was governor at the time, was not a fan. He, just very briefly, he said it was a gateway drug, which you can make the case in terms of recreational marijuana as a gateway drug. You'd be wrong, but you can make the case. But medical marijuana, just think of the logic of this for a second, okay? The medicine we give people now, Oxycontin and Klonopin and Percocet and all this, is the stuff that we're worried that marijuana will be the gateway to, right? So the logic of Governor Corbett's position is, let's just skip the gateway. Let's go right to the hard drug. In other words, we're not going to give you medical marijuana, we're going to give you Oxycontin, because we're worried that if we give you medical marijuana, you're going to use Oxycontin. Think about the logic of that, all right? So he's gone. Anyway, so we now have Governor Wolf, who will enthusiastically sign a bill that we bring to his desk. We have the votes in the House to pass this bill. Now, we're going to pass it in the Senate in the next 2 weeks. We have the votes in the House to pass it. We have 120 or so, 125 out of the 102 we need. We can get more, I think. That's not a problem. The problem is bringing it to the floor. The majority leader, the person who typically decides whether to bring a bill to the floor, Dave Reed, is a co-sponsor of the bill. That's good. The Speaker of the House, who has less of a role, but still some role, is less enthusiastic, and for reasons that, and what I hear, have very little to do with the merits of the bill. So we're trying to work through that, and that's a process. But I think come June, when a lot of things are being negotiated, this will be one of the things that we get passed. When this is passed, it's going to be about a year, a little bit more than a year of a ramp up in order to get this industry going. We've got to appoint a board, the Cannabis Control Board, essentially. 11 people so far, the way the bill's written, appointed by the governor. That board's got to meet. That board's got to promulgate regulations for applications. That board's got to print up and distribute applications. It's got to take them in, evaluate them, and issue licenses. And then, once people get licenses, there's 3 kinds of licenses: distribution, cultivation, and dispensary. The first people who need the licenses are the cultivators. They have to grow it. It's interesting, little funny thing I think about from time to time. You can't move this across state lines. Everything has to be grown in Pennsylvania. So the seeds for the first batch of it are just going to have to appear. It's like, you know how you put like a cucumber in the trunk of your car, come back 4 months later, there's a lot of fur. Same idea, they're just going to spontaneously grow. But anyway, once that happens, then the plants grow and people start getting medicine. That's going to take a year, it's going to take a while to do. But at the end of it all, this is going to be a huge new industry, because it's been a huge new industry wherever they've done it correctly, because there's a huge demand for this. And so, you know, I think it's a good thing and an important thing to be in on the ground floor of this, because we're helping people, and it's good to help people. That's my top priority here, and I'm sure it's many of your top priorities as well. But there's nothing wrong with making some money on the deal. That's why we have a free market system. That's why people are going to grow it, to help people. That's why pharmaceuticals make the drugs they make. That's why people sell, that's why Bayer makes aspirin, okay? It's nice that it cures headaches, but they make money off of it. So it's a good time to be involved and to follow this closely and to get very involved in this organization. So when the time comes, if you're interested, you're ready to take advantage of the opportunity that will be there. So a couple, 3-4 years from now, you can buy a real big yacht, you can invite me on it, and we can sit there and sip martinis and think about that we're helping people as well as riding your yacht. So anyway, with that, are there any questions at all about the bill or about the political process or anything? Yes?
Can you tell me exactly what it is going to be? I know you've got cancer was one of the things that you said. Can you tell me the actual medical, what you guys are going, because I know I'm hoping that you're going to add some things to it, which is why I'm here.
Well, okay, this is a little bit of a story. The question, what's your name?
Catherine.
Catherine. The question Catherine asks is the bill, last bill, and we're going to get a better bill this time, but not a perfect bill. Perfection is hard to come by in politics. But the bill we're going to has a list of conditions for which a doctor can recommend cannabis. Originally, the list was 39 conditions. A couple days before the vote, the Republican leadership in the Senate came back and said, we pared it down. Here's, I think, 11 conditions. Then they came back and said, here's 12, because we're adding fibromyalgia because one of the Republican leaders has a brother who has it. That's how public policy is made, all right? Now, I mean, the conditions they took off were bizarre. They made no sense. Neither did really the conditions they left on. There were a couple really obscure conditions, which I didn't even know what they were. And then they took off glaucoma, which was the very first thing that I heard that cannabis helped with. But still, it helped with cancer, PTSD, epilepsy, things like that. We want to add conditions, but and I'm only speaking for myself here, and this may not be achievable. But what I would really like is not to have a list of conditions at all. What I would really like is just to say that doctors, who, by the way, are on the hook. They're on the hook criminally if they do something criminal. They're on the hook for malpractice if they do something negligent. And they're on the hook for internal discipline if they do something against their professional standards. Doctors aren't going to be playing around with this for you, for a patient. They're not going to risk their careers for that. So we're not going to have doctors running wild. I think doctors should decide, based on the evidence, what conditions they want to prescribe this for their patients. Doctors are already prescribing drugs off what they call off-label, from what the FDA has approved it for. Do the same. Let doctors decide. You don't have a list. If we do have a list, at the very least, it should be a longer list, and it should be a liberal process for the Cannabis Control Board to add conditions as scientific evidence justifies it. So we're going to be pushing as hard as we can to get that done. The big fight we're having right now is the fight over vaping. Because some people are, and the Senate, you have the votes either way, but some people in the House are like, well, you know, vaping is too close to smoking it, and that makes people stoned. And again, I don't know if you've ever, I carry Percocet with me every minute of the day because I have a propensity for kidney stones, which are not as much fun as they've been described. And I can have a kidney stone at any time, and I need painkiller immediately. So I carry Percocet. I don't know if you've ever taken Percocet. I mean, I'm a zombie when I say I'm much higher on Percocet than I ever was on pot. So I'm like, why are we worried that someone with, stage 4 glioma or someone with intractable epilepsy, well, it wouldn't even be, because they wouldn't even be smoking. But for example, appetite stimulation for chemotherapy patients. That's, best delivered through through vaping, or some PTSD relief. So again, people aren't doing this to get high, people are doing it to feel better. So I'm trying to make that case, but it's still tied up in people's minds with, you know, culture wars from the 60s and hippies and Jerry Garcia and burning your bra and being against the Vietnam War, and, you know, and it's not about that, okay? I always say the average pot smoker doesn't look like Jimi Hendrix anymore. They look like Dick Cheney, all right? And so, you know, we've got to, and you can, when you talk to most people, sort of pull that apart and just deal with this rationally as a medicine, rather than refighting the Vietnam War or whatever it is some people think they're doing. I hope that was a long-winded enough answer to your question.
He's trying. It was, no, so he's trying.
Certainly, yes,
so
I'm trying.
Ultimately, just to paraphrase it, ultimately you would rather let the doctors have control
Yes.
and let them, so is that what you're gonna put forward?
Well, that's what I'm trying.
Okay.
The problem is, I'm not in the majority. And so, if I go too far for the comfort of the majority leadership, they say, well, that's great, Dalen, we're not running a bill with X in it. So you have to negotiate with them, because they decide what comes to the floor. So that's where we are. So we're trying to make the best case. If you have legislators, and I'm not trying to be partisan here, but frankly, Republican legislators in your district, then, you know, you need to talk to them and make them understand what this issue is and what it is not. Anyway, I've talked too long. Thank you so much, everybody, for letting me prattle on. Work with these guys. Oh wait, there's one more thing. We'll do the lightning real quick. I'll give a quick answer.
Could you briefly describe like the cultivation methods that'll be allowed in this?
You can cultivate it. I'm not an expert in cultivation. Anyway, you want the only strictures are there'll be an amount that you're allowed to cultivate, and it'll have to be indoors. You can't have they don't want open marijuana fields. Yeah. Which would be kind of cool. But anyway, they don't want it. All right, guys.
All right, I need to roam around a little bit. I'm a former prosecutor. I'm a criminal defense attorney by practice. So, my involvement in this is not simply as a normal representative, or hey, let's be able to go to the park and throw the frisbee and smoke a joint. But really, I have had the opportunity to see the effect that marijuana prohibition has had on people through my time as a prosecutor, through my time as a criminal defense attorney, and most certainly now when we're talking about issues facing patients. Now, one thing that Dalen Leach, Senator Leach, kind of did was gloss over, how long we have been working to do this here in Pennsylvania. The very first medicinal marijuana bill in Pennsylvania was introduced in 2009. And it was introduced by a Philadelphia-based Democrat. And it's when we had a Democrat in control of the governor's mansion in Ed Rendell, and the Democrats controlled the House. But that bill, unfortunately, stalled in committee, and we never got a House vote on it. But the enthusiasm, the momentum that we had in 2009 and 2010 suggested to us that we cannot be stopped. We had the momentum. We knew we were on the right side. One state after another was passing medicinal marijuana legislation throughout the country. This was before Colorado and Washington, obviously, but we really felt that we were on the right side of history. That was in 2009. In 2010, things changed significantly in Harrisburg. Governor Corbett took over from Governor Rendell, and the Republicans established a majority in the Senate and the House. And there went our aspirations for medicinal marijuana. I first met Senator Leach in 2011 at the Pennsylvania Progressive Summit. And he told me, I am introducing another medicinal marijuana bill. I'm introducing a full legalization bill. And once again, I felt very enthusiastic. I was very excited. We have a sitting senator introducing legislation that already had demonstrated to have significant public support. Did I say that was in 2011? Here we are in 2015, and we have moved forward significantly. We are on the cusp of passing some type of medicinal marijuana reform here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are close. We are closer than we have ever been. And why are we so close? We are so close because some families with children who have intractable epilepsy, Dravet syndrome, horrible seizure conditions, went and met with Mike Fulmer. And Mike Fulmer joined with Senator Dalen Leach to bring this forward. And it's something that we can't talk enough about, how important it was here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where socially conservative Republicans took over our legislature and the governor's office, because this was when Governor Corbett was still in office, to have a socially conservative Republican do his homework, go to his pastor, and come back and say, no, not only do I think this is a good thing, I think this is imperative. And Senator Fulmer, like Senator Leach, has really put his political credentials, his political power, his gravitas behind this, and we are so close. We are so close that we passed a medicinal marijuana bill in the Pennsylvania Senate in 2014 by 47-7. 47-7, that's 86% support in the Pennsylvania Senate. A Senate controlled by Republicans. That's significant. It's incredible. It tells us that we have the support. It tells us that we can move forward with this. It tells us that we're not crazy when we're suggesting that medicinal marijuana is an appropriate treatment option, an appropriate treatment alternative that physicians should have available. But just like Senator Leach described earlier, what happened in 2014? The bill basically got gutted. It got gutted in the Appropriations Committee. He said 39 qualifying conditions. I thought it was 45 qualifying conditions, but that went down to 9. And it went down to that number for no reason whatsoever. Conditions with solid clinical evidence to support the efficacy of medical cannabis were eliminated, such as glaucoma, chronic neuropathic pain, HIV/AIDS. No reason for these conditions to be eliminated other than it was an attempt to defeat the bill. Pull things out of it, try to get the bill sponsors to pull it from consideration because they eviscerated it too much. And that's what we're facing right now. And Senate Bill 3, as introduced, is exactly the same as Senate Bill 1182 with the same restrictions. We absolutely are counting on Senator Leach and Senator Fulmer to introduce comprehensive amendments, which we know they will do. Senator Leach gets it. He understands. He knows that vaporization is critical. He knows that smoking is critical. He knows that cannabis is non-toxic, and he knows that this should be a decision left to physicians and their patients. But, no, I'm good. But his colleagues in the Senate, or should I say a very vocal minority that will have the opportunity to weigh in on this bill when it gets to Senate appropriations, what will they do? And if this bill gets to the House, what will the House do? The devil is in the details, ladies and gentlemen. If we want to have a medicinal cannabis program here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that provides relief to as many Pennsylvanians as possible, we need to have a bill that is as inclusive as possible. We need a bill that will benefit all Pennsylvanians who could potentially utilize medicinal cannabis. Why is this important? Obviously, it's critical to patients here in Pennsylvania who I know I have met with. Tom has met with, Russ has met with, Heather is one of these, these parents here who is seriously considering becoming a medical refugee, moving to another state merely so that medical cannabis is available so she can help her daughter. Senator Leach is 100% aware of how important and how critical the timing is of this. But as we move forward, what are we going to get? Are we going to get legislation that will benefit all Pennsylvanians? Are we going to get legislation that will, open the doors, for example, to a comprehensive medical cannabis program? If we are only giving a limited number of conditions access to medical cannabis, And if that medical cannabis can only be oils or tinctures or edibles, as in the current bill, well then, ladies and gentlemen, we really don't need too many growers. We really don't need too many dispensers, and we really don't need too many processors. And that doesn't make sense for anybody. What we want, and what the goal of the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society is to bring high-quality medicinal cannabis to as many Pennsylvanians as possible who can benefit from it at a price that they can afford. And that's another issue, ladies and gentlemen, that we're going to have to address. You know, I had the opportunity to sit down with the attorney who's going to be writing the regulations for the board if this thing gets passed. And these are some of the issues that I had a chance to discuss with her. I said, number one, we've got to make sure that Pennsylvania patients have access to medicine, as many as possible. Number two, it's got to be affordable. What's it do anybody? How can it do anybody any good if if medicinal marijuana is $500 an ounce at a Pennsylvania dispensary? No one's going to buy it. A medicinal patient may need an ounce every 2 or 3 days. That has suddenly placed that 100% out of reach. You know, what about medicinal edibles or tinctures? If you're pegging that to the black market, then those medicines become out of reach. You know, one thing that our legislation is going to put forth is that an insurance company is not required to provide coverage for medicinal marijuana. Therefore, if we are truly engaging in a patient-friendly initiative, and you know, as Senator Leach said, you know, if people get involved in this for profit, which you know, generally speaking is how most businesses start, everyone deserves an opportunity to make a profit, but not at the extent of patients. And what our concern is that what we've seen in other states is that if medicinal marijuana prices are pegged to the black market, then it becomes practically unaffordable for patients. We don't specifically know right now. Can I tell you, hey, you know, in a best case scenario, marijuana is $35 an ounce to produce, and we'll sell it medicinally for $70 an ounce. I think that that would be a best case scenario, but we don't quite know that right now. And how is that going to shake out when the regulations are drafted and we have the ability to get, for example, a grower license? How many plants would a grower necessarily need to grow? Can someone with 50 plants get a grower license? Or does that have to be 50,000 plants? And these are some of these very critical issues that we're going to have to discuss and address as we move forward. Getting a law passed is just the first step. And that's why we are here. And that's why we have formed the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society, because we want to make sure that we are promoting best practices amongst anyone who wants to get involved with this. We want to ensure that we are promoting a system that benefits Pennsylvania patients first and foremost. Secondly, if we can make some money off of it, then fine. But